go to Wood Magazine, issue number 164, September 2005. And on page 24 in my copy, right here at the top left, is a shop tip written by yours truly. The shop tip is this: cutting the shoulders for tennons, where the shoulder is at a 90-degree angle to one or both edges of the workpiece. In this case, this is an apron to what will be a desk. That's pretty straight, square, straightforward, okay? However, down here, these legs from the top of the inside taper outward, okay? So that means the shoulders of these tennons here are not at 90 degrees to either edge of this particular workpiece, in this case the rail for the desk. The challenge is how to find that angle easily and so that you have no gap and a perfect fit. One way to go about that is to set this top piece, which will determine the distance between the legs. Then set where you want the rail to be on the workpiece. Then from there you can draw lines, and that way you can determine where your which your angle is and where the cuts need to be on the wood. You can also use an angle finder like this and use that to set the angle of your cross-cut sled or whatever. However, there is a much easier way to go about it that requires very little measuring, if no measuring, and will give you a perfect fit every time if you follow the procedures correctly. It's a matter of simple geometry. We already have an angle here on these legs, the taper of these legs right here, and I'm going to show you how to use that at the table saw to cut the shoulders and tendons, to cut the shoulders to your tendons so that you have a perfect fit with no gaps. Okay, the first thing you want to do, of course, is make sure that your crosscut sled is set to be square to your table saw blade. And we're good. Okay, now, in the shop tip here, I actually suggested using the table saw leg, the taper of the table saw leg itself to set the angle. However, there is another way to do that, and that is to simply use the cutoff, as I mentioned before. The advantage to using the cutoff instead of the actual leg is that if you happen to cut into the cutoff, so what? You cut into the leg, now you got something you need to repair or replace. So, we're going to use the same concept, but in this case we're going to use the cutoff from the taper. The first step is going to be to taper the end of the rail, okay? And the reason why we want to do that, you'll see clear in just a moment. Okay, I set the depth of my tri-square to 1 inch because that's how long I want the tenon to be. I set this up so that the fence on my table saw is on the right side of the fence, and because my crosscut sled is set up to work to the right of the table saw blade. Okay, you could just as easily do this on the other side of the table saw blade. My table saw miter sled is just set up this way. That's all. Now, So I take this and I set that up against the blade, because in this case the right side of the blade is going to determine the shoulder of the tenon. Next, I want to reset the height of the blade to just about 3/16 of an inch in this case, because this is 3/4 inch stock, and I want to have a 3/8 inch thick tenon. So I need to take off an equal amount on each side. Incidentally, if you wanted to, you can use the same concept on your router table. Okay. Now, this is why we cut the taper to the end of the rail first, because we're going to take it resting the cutoff against the fence here of the miter sled, and taking the workpiece and resting against that. Now I slide it over all the way against the fence to determine the depth of the cut between the fence and the right side of the table saw blade, and this now matches it's now flush with the table saw fence. Okay, anyway, so now I'm just going to cut there, and that's going to determine my shoulder. Okay, now that we've made this cut here, I am going to go ahead and use this setup as it is to nibble away the waste material to make the tenon. Now that we've removed the waste here on this side of the tenon, it makes the face of our tenon right there and the shoulder. I have to turn the piece over to cut the other side. However, that's not going to work, because now the angle doesn't match and it's not flush against the fence. So you take the cutoff, flip it over, and now we have a flush reference against the fence, and the cut to the shoulder of the tenon on the other side will match the angle on this side. Okay, now that we have made the shoulder for the tenon on this end of the workpiece, I'm going to set this against the taper of the leg on one side here, and actually I'm going to do this from the underside as such, and I'm going to use this other workpiece here just to kind of keep things level. Now, the top of this rail is to be 12 inches from the bottom of the leg. Alright, so what I'm doing here is I'm setting this tri-square for 10 inches because this is a 2-inch wide rail. So I'll set this for 10 inches from the bottom of the leg, and I will set the rail, position the rail accordingly. Now, with this shoulder flush against this tapered face of the desk leg, I will now make a line here, and just so I don't get confused with any other lines or marks that may be on this board, I'm going to make an arrow. And now, I know that the line I just drew here will be where the new, or the next, where the shoulder will be for the next on the other side here. I also know that a tenon is going to be 1 inch wide, so I'm going to mark 1 inch here, and I know that this is where I want this line here is where I want to cut the end of the board off. So this is going to be waist, it's going to be cut off, and then this will be my tenon area, and this will be my new shoulder. Okay, so that's how we cut that shoulder. Now we need to cut this one. Before I need to cut off the waste material on this side. I also notice here I put a spring clamp to hold this scrap piece, cutoff piece in place. I should have done it before for the other shot. It was sliding back and forth. So for safety purposes, we want to have that piece clamped. Now, I'm going to set this to the correct angle. So I can cut off the waste material here. Okay, now let's see how we did. I created the shoulder for each side of the rail for the tenons, and I have some loose fitting tenons apparently, so I will have to correct that later. That's easy to do. Anyway, there you have it. Nice tight joints here, nice tight joints there. Neighbor's dog barking in the background. Can't have it any better than that. I'll give you a closer look. Okay, here we go. Just note, I have nice tight joints up there, obviously. Good. And down here, nice tight fitting joint there, and there. And there you have it. That is how to make your tapered shoulders to fit perfectly. And if you have any ideas on how to get a neighbor's dog to shut up without killing it, I'd really appreciate it. Stupid dog. Be quiet. What are you barking at? Get that dog. I better get a bigger stick.